Hello and welcome to the Storytelling for the Soul podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Kanata, and this is the place we talk about all things expressive writing and other creative techniques, all with a little bit of Buffy the Vampire Slayer thrown in. Buckle up and enjoy. Welcome back to another episode of the Storytelling for the Soul podcast. As you've probably gathered from the episode title, I want to talk about writing for healing today. Now, disclaimer, when I say writing for healing, what I don't mean is that journaling or writing a memoir or any other kind of writing practice is going to magically cure any physical, mental, emotional, spiritual challenge you may be going through at the moment. But I can tell you from personal lived experience that writing can definitely help. So while it may not be a cure, it certainly isn't. And anyone who is going through something particularly challenging or any kind of physical health issue, obviously speak with your primary care physician and any other specialist that you're working with. But writing can definitely help. And I don't think people quite realize that if you are working with a psychologist or any kind of mental health care professional, you can actually weave writing into your sessions. So for example, someone like me, I express far better in the written word than verbally. So if I was working with a psychologist, which I don't happen to be at the moment, but that's okay. If I was, I could definitely, and say we were working on a particular issue and focusing on that, I could definitely take my journal entries and share those with the psychologist or other counselor, mental health professional that you're working with. And I've had clients who do this and they certainly find it very helpful because, as I said, not everyone expresses themselves the same way. Now, with my business, I am all about embodied processing, which is a body-based approach to working with trauma, and weaving that in with writing and expressive writing, which I'm sure you've heard about. There's a bunch of information and research. It's all backed by science, expressive writing. There's a bunch of research and information on Google that will be able to explain James Pennebaker's experiment far better than I can. Particularly verbally, I'd have a better shot at doing it on paper. I've written a couple of blogs about it, so head over to my website, sarahkanata.com, if you'd like to find out more about what I've written. But basically, there's science behind writing. Now, the how it happens, I'm not quite so sure anyone is 100% certain on, but I can tell you that through my own lived experience and through working with many clients, both in terms of one-off sessions and also particularly writing memoir, that seems to be where I've seen the biggest personal shifts that people have. And when I agree to engage in writing a memoir with people, I always say to them, write the first draft primarily for yourself and more as a healing exercise, healing and processing exercise. And then if publishing, whether it's self-publishing or traditional publishing, is something that they are keen to pursue, then I suggest that we do follow-up drafts, whether that's a second draft, third draft, fourth draft. Here's the thing about writing, and I don't think many people quite understand that the magic in terms of writing, and especially in terms of anything that's published and things that become a New York Times bestseller or whatever else your goals might be, the magic really happens in the editing and rewriting process. So, and I'll speak from experience here. When I'm writing, and any other writer, and you can probably find a lot of this information online, when they say that they're writing 1,000 words a day, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're writing 1,000 of the most profound and moving words you've ever written in your life. The reality is so much of quality writing is about establishing the practice, being disciplined, coming back and back over and over again to stare down a blank page and to see what evolves and what happens. And some days you will be on fire, you will be in flow, you will feel like you're on top of the world and you're able to write pages and pages of what you deem really good content. And then there'll be other days where it just doesn't flow. And I can't explain why that happens. I've certainly noticed that with myself, particularly with more of the creative and personal writing, more so than, so I work in communications. I have done so for the last 10 years. I've never really had an issue with writer's block. I personally don't think writer's block exists. I think what people are talking about when they refer to writer's block is a judgment that what they're writing is actually not any good. But there's no such thing as you can't actually write down words, form sentences and paragraphs. Like, that actually does not exist. So back to the point of this episode. I don't just teach standard journaling or standard book writing, memoir writing, whatever you want to call it. When I'm working with someone, I want them to get more than just, and I say this in quotes, although you can't see me, just a finished book out of our time together. I want them to discover whatever they need to throughout the process. And this is the beautiful thing about writing. And I can share this because I'm actually just on the cusp of beginning the memoir that I've wanted to write for the last 7 years. Now, there's been a lot of different reasons as to why I haven't tackled that memoir yet. One is because I just felt as though I didn't have the time, which I think is in reality just an excuse, because I make time for all the things that I enjoy doing, like going to the gym, walking, all the other stuff that I magically find time for. That was one factor. Another factor was I wasn't 100% sold. So I have a general theme in mind that I want to explore, which is from my younger years. And you will find that a lot of memoir is based on childhood, because if you've read or heard anything about trauma, lots of stuff happens in childhood that has pretty profound repercussions on the rest of our life. So the other component as to why there's been this 7-year delay to this book is because I haven't quite been sold that I'm ready to go back to that time of my life. And that brings me to another point, especially when it comes to memoir. Writing is actually a very courageous pursuit, because in many ways it would be easier to just turn your back on everything that's happened in the past and pretend it didn't happen, but that's not how healing happens. So trauma happens in the physical body, and that means that the healing side also needs to happen in the physical body. And writing is a wonderful complementary tool to that entire process. Now, I have in the past gone back to the theme of this book and written about it, and I find this in clients too. The most wonderful thing about writing, and when I talk about writing for healing, it's not that it makes anything go away, because there's so many things in our life that have happened that we don't have any control over. However, writing has this wonderful ability, particularly if you're working with a mentor who can help to guide you, who's experienced. It helps you to look at things in a different way. And I know that if I had have written this book that I'm talking about at 30, when I first thought about it, compared to now, I'm 37, it would have been a dramatically different book, because I would have written a book that I needed to write at the time. And now, 7 years, fast forward 7 years, I'm going to be writing a book that I need right now. And that book is definitely going to be informed by much more life experience. And I think the real benefit of doing more than one draft is that often when clients come to me, what they want to write about is a traumatic, challenging experience. And a lot of that first manuscript and that first draft, and I'm in no way saying this from a place of judgment, it's actually part of the process and it's what needs to happen. But a lot of that first draft and that manuscript becomes a finger pointing exercise. And then as we work together, as I look at sentences, as I ask for more information about certain things, slowly the layers unravel, and people almost always look at the same exact situation. They come to look at it very differently by the time they've finished the book. Now, if you've got any specific burning questions about writing for healing or writing generally, I'm always very happy to hear from you. Feel free to reach out to me at info@sarahkanata.com. All of this information I will pop in the notes so that you don't have to worry about spelling. You can find out more about my work on my website, sarahkanata.com. But what I'd really like you to take out of this episode is this idea that, and this is mostly relevant to memoir or any kind of personal writing, because you don't have to end up writing a book, which is 60,000 words, to process and use and draw on this concept of writing for healing. You could write a short story, you could write a blog. There's many different ways that you could go about this. But what I'd like to challenge you in thinking about is, don't just think about the end product, as in what you're going to end up with, this book or this blog or this journal entry, whatever it happens to be. It's really about the process. It's really about having the courage to go back to a situation, to do so from a state where you are adequately resourced. And what I mean by that is, in embodied processing language, a resource is something that you can come back to whenever you are triggered, because particularly if you're going back into the depths of a very traumatic experience, which, to be honest with you, that's what it always tends to be with the people that I work with, that you have something to come back to so that when your nervous system tips into a state of overwhelm, you've then got something to come back to help to bring you, well, your nervous system back to regulation. So we can dip in and out this way without getting too traumatized. And that's something that you should be aware of. If you are going into this process thinking that it's going to be a walk in the park, please don't, because it can be really challenging to go back and look at things and process things. And I promise you, you won't regret it, but it's not necessarily easy. And it can take you to places that you've never been at, that you never expected to go. So please do plan for that as part of the process, but also just value the actual process. So many people are keen to get to the end, to the finish line. As they say, and I'm sure that this sounds super cheesy, but the marathon is often not about the finish line. It's about what you went through to get yourself through that marathon. And then the last thing I want to say is relevant if you are writing a book. And this doesn't matter what kind of book that you're writing, but it's one thing to start writing a book. It's another thing to finish the book. So please, please, please don't just aim to start writing the book. Actually finish it. I'm going to leave it there. Thank you so much. Feel free to leave comments. As I said, email me, check out my website, and I will see you next week.